I just don't know why people cry. Like, what happens where people cry in this book? It's one of those books where it makes you think while you're reading, and while I did tear up, I haven't like sobbed yet. And I just don't know if I've gone to that part yet. This vlog took a turn that I was not expecting. Hi everyone, my name is Tori, this is Noah Life, and welcome back to my channel. Today I have the start of a brand new reading vlog that I'm very nervous for. I am going to be reading A Little Life by Hanya. I don't know how to pronounce this last name. I'm going to butcher it, but I'm very nervous. I'm very nervous to read this because literally every single person that I know that has read this has cried. And I see it all over TikTok. I see this all over Bookstagram. I see this all over BookTube now. And I'm like, am I ready to cry? Am I ready to cry with this book? I don't know. But I'm gonna take you on the journey with me. And honestly, I think I might cry reading this book. So it says, remarkable, an epic study of trauma and friendship written with such intelligence and depth of perception. It'll be one of the benchmarks against which all other novels that broach the subjects will be measured. So it says it follows A Little Life, follows four college classmates broke adrift and buoyed only by their friendship and ambition as they move to New York in search of fame and fortune. While their relationships, which are tinged by addiction, success, and pride, deepen over the decades, the men are held together by their devotion to the brilliant, enigmatic Jude, a man scarred by unspeakable childhood trauma, a hymn to brotherly bonds, and a masterful deception of love in the 21st century. I'm very nervous. This is a very long book. It's 800 pages, and these are like Bible thin pages. So I do have the physical book. I really am intrigued by this cover. I don't know. I'm very intrigued, but I've just heard all the praise for this book. I do have the audiobook, which is 33 hours long. I wanted to get the audiobook as well, is because I usually will read along and listen to the audiobook. That is how I really kind of have been consuming a lot of my books lately, is by reading physically and listening to the audiobook. That's just how I've been doing it. So I don't know if I'm gonna get the ebook just because this is a thick book and it's hard to hold, even though it is very floppy. The pages are just very thin, but come along with me. We'll see if I cry. Oh my god, please don't let me be that woman that cries on YouTube. But here we go, my journey with A Little Life. Wish me luck. But I wanted to give a little update, a little update on A Little Life. So I'm currently almost done with part 1. Definitely gonna finish part 1 tonight, which is just the street that they live on. And the next part, part 2, is called The Postman. And this book is actually written very interestingly. Like, it's kind of diary format, but it's like someone telling their life story, because there's little like parts put in parentheses. It's like, but he would come to learn of blah 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 blah, you know, stuff like that. I do find each character very interesting. I just don't know why people cry. Like, what happens where people cry in this book? It's interesting that they're a group of friends, you know, that, you know, one's super rich, one has like some medical problems, and then two are just like, you know, they're all just trying to live their life all separately. So I find it interesting. I also find it interesting that this was written by a woman, but it's about 4 men. So I'm very, hi mama, hi. So I'm very interested to see like where this goes, but I'm interested. Like, it's usually with books like this, I'm like, I'll put it down, I'm never gonna pick it back up again, like I'm bored. But I'm actually interested, and I think it's because I know people's reactions, and I really want to go look up like reviews and stuff, but I'm like, okay, don't go look up reviews. Just wait, just do your own thing. Like, just read on your own terms. So I'm hoping to finish minimum part 2 tomorrow. So I think I'll have about 150 pages tomorrow to read, which I don't think is going to be that bad. Yeah, it's about 150 pages. And if I can get to part 4, even better, just because I'm going out of town next weekend. And I want to have this up for you guys next weekend. So we'll see, but I definitely want to get through, at minimum, that much tomorrow. So it'll be 250 pages, but this is a thick book, but I'm very excited. Very excited. Mimi, are you very excited? She just wants attention right now, but I'll probably update you guys when I get to part 3. I feel like that'll be a good update. Right, Mama? Okay, bye. It's a Missy. Oh my gosh. Hi, girl. Hi. Oh, you're getting so big. Oh, you can't do this to me no more. You can't do this to me no more. Sit. Sit. We're going to update the vlog, Missy. You going to sit? You going to sit like this? Good girl. Oh, yes. Good girl. Yeah, good girl. Okay. Oh, this is my book. Thank you. Okay, bye. A little life update. Things are getting interesting with this book. I got to part 3, so I'm officially 30% of the way through. And I do hope to get to part 5 today, which I think part 5 is 481. So I have to read from 240 to 481. Yeah, that's not that much. That's a lot. Anyway, I have some conflicting thoughts because I still don't understand why people get so emotional. And I did go watch some people's vlogs, like the beginning of some people's vlogs that's read this book, because I really wanted to see like what their first impression was. And apparently they knew a little bit about this book, and I didn't know anything going into this book. So the POV switches were interesting. They're interesting. It's not my like favorite thing, because sometimes they can be jarring, especially in part 3. We go from learning so much about Jude and, you know, this injury that he has and how he's trying to deal with it. And by trying to deal with it, I mean like attempting suicide a couple of times and cutting himself and just feeling that self-loathing. And we get a little bit of his backstory, but then we go to Harold's POV and I'm like, what the heck? And Harold is basically his mentor that's kind of like helped him, treats him like a son because his son passed away, and him and his wife treat him like a son. They adopt him. It's adorable. It's cute. I love it, right? And I did get teary-eyed a couple of times because as someone who is disabled, I really like connected with that of like having that self-loathing and just like hating the body that you're in, you know what I mean? So I'm interested to see if the next part is going to be about, like, I don't know if we're just going to be following Jude, or if we're following like each like part is about other people, because like part 1 was like them living together, their living situations, kind of like an introduction to each of the characters, right? We see how, you know, Malcolm is wealthy, JB is wealthy, he has like, you know, things going on, and then Jude and Willem are just like more the poor friends, you know what I mean? They don't have that much like money to spend, and they're living in New York, but they're living in New York and they're great and that's fine, right? The Postman part 2 was more about Jude and his story and his like background. So I don't know if Vanities are gonna be about anyone else. I mean, it starts off with JB, so I think this might be JB. I don't know. I'm very interested. Like, it's one of those books where it makes you think while you're reading, and while I did tear up, I haven't like sobbed yet. And I just don't know if I've gone to that part yet. But I'm kind of nervous, but I'm gonna have dinner and then I'm gonna sit down and listen to the audiobook and read some more, so I can keep planned pages for each of the day. But that's my little life vlog, and I will see you later. So this vlog took a turn that I was not expecting. I'm DNFing this book, and I feel really bad for saying that. I do feel really bad because I'm like 40% through this book, okay? I was listening to the audiobook last night, and I realized that, okay. So I hope that what I'm about to say is gonna come across in a way that's not like mean towards the author or anything like that, but the reason why I had to DNF this book was because it was too triggering. And I don't know anything about the author. I don't know anything about this author. I don't know if she lives as a disabled person, has disabled experiences with someone who has an illness, chronic illness, a disability, any of that stuff, right? Or she's interviewed people, like I haven't researched that. But as someone who is disabled, and I've had conversations with Just Piece of Books, I was talking to her last night, and I said, low-key, this is like pretty triggering. And I might dive into spoilers going forward, but Jude is the disabled character in this book. And at first it's kind of alluded to at the beginning of the book, like, oh, his legs don't work, oh, he has problems with his legs, and it comes out that he was in an accident. He says he had a car injury, that's what it says. And we don't know exactly what happened. I do know that he was sexually assaulted previously. I read about that, like it's alluded to basically. I don't know how much it is dived into later in the books. And for me, he's attempted suicide, whether that was on purpose or not, but he is a cutter. And I do know that cutting is more so, cutting can be used as a like self-infliction pain thing and not necessarily like attempting suicide. But there is one part where he cuts too deep. And it's never said for sure if that is on purpose or not. So it could be like an accidental attempted suicide or on purpose. It's not. I don't know if it goes into detail later, but it's not said in the parts that I read. And as someone who is disabled and someone who has a chronic illness, those thoughts are very common. Suicidal thoughts are very common. The rate of suicide of people who are disabled and or chronically ill are very, very high statistically. And I will say I have dealt with some of those thoughts. I'm very open about that throughout like all of my videos, right? And for me, it's just, it hits a little too close to home when he says, I'm a burden to my friends, or, you know, I'm tired of my body not working correctly. He has to live with all of these accommodations that he finds annoying. And like when his friends want to help, like Malcolm is trying to renovate the apartment for him and make sure it's ADA compliant. And he's like getting annoyed by that. And I will say that for me, it just hits a little too close to home. And I am like, I'm fine in that headspace. Like I can kind of separate it. But for me, I don't particularly like to read books where the characters go through this. And I don't know if there's an HEA at the end. And I mean HEA as in, like, it doesn't have to be a romance, or it doesn't have to be a romance to me, but the character doesn't die. And apparently I've looked up some spoilers for this book because after I realized where it was going, I didn't know if I can continue reading a book where this character who is dealing with this disability and all of these problems, health issues, I don't know if he lives at the end of the book. And apparently some people say online that he dies by suicide. And that, once again, that is too realistic for me as a person to read, because that's like my lived, not experience, but like I do have those thoughts, and I don't want not to get pushed into that way. I just don't want to read about a character who actually goes through with it, considering I've had those thoughts. Now, that's not saying like, oh my God, oh, what the heck. I also feel a certain way. Once again, I don't know anything about this author, that I went to go look at Goodreads reviews, and it's either 5 stars, this book's amazing, or 1 star, this book is trash. And a lot of the people who say 1 star says that this is more like trauma porn or misery porn. It's like writing a book to just be sad. And honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect from this book. I really didn't have any expectations. I thought it was going to be a good book where I have a lot of thoughts and I sit down and I'm like, wow, this really makes me think about my life. Like, I think of The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. That's one of my favorite books because actually our female character, she dies by suicide, and she's thrown into what is called the Midnight Library, where all of these, not regrets, but like pivotal points in her life, if she could like open a book and go down that path to see, right? And, you know, at the end, she realizes that like the reason why she went through it is not the same. Like, she doesn't actually feel those. So that's more of like a happily ending for a character who dies by suicide and has to deal with those thoughts. I just don't think this book is. And so like comparing those two, right? Midnight Library makes you think like, do you have, like, do you, like living life with regrets? Like what could happen if you chose this path over this path in your life, right? A lot of people have those thoughts. It's like at the end of your life, whatever that is, what will you look back and think about? Like, would you say, what if I did this? Like, kind of for me, I got out of it, like, what do I get out of the book, right? Don't live life going through the what ifs. Like, oh, what if I did this? Just do it. Obviously, it's positive. Positive, I mean, like, what if I went on this trip? Well, just do it. What if I took that chance and started a new career? Why not, right? That's what I got out of it. I don't particularly think that I'm gonna get anything good from A Little Life. And that makes me kind of sad because I really wanted to love this book. I really wanted to dive into it and get something out of it. I also found out that there's some other characters that die, like I said, spoilers, but by a car crash. And I don't know. I also know that this talks a lot about the LGBTQ community and being gay and all of that stuff. And I also found out that Jude, not only is he a disabled character, not only has he had a sexual assault in the past, multiple, he's been tortured, he's been, you know, he has a traumatic past. I also find out that he gets into a relationship with a man, but in that relationship, he sexually assaults him and abuses him and like tortures him in like, I guess, an emotional and physical way. That's what I read. And that's not what I particularly like and want to read. Like, I want some type of good. Do I believe that in people's lives that this actually happens? Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's an important story to write if you want to write that kind of fiction. I am just not a particular person that I want to read that type of fiction. And I want to read about that, considering it hits like too close to home, not the abuse. More living with a disability and a chronic illness and having those thoughts and feeling like a burden and never feeling okay with my body, and it's never going to get better. There is no like, oh, it's going to get better. No, it's going to stay like this or get worse over my life. And I don't particularly want to read that, like to the point where I think in this book he has to get his legs amputated because they're so, like, he has spine issues that lead to open wounds and just all of these different things that, like, from that car injury, what they call it, it's had all of these things that happen, like progressively it gets worse. Having a progressive disease and a degenerative disease, I don't want to read that. I don't want to read that. And like I'm saying, I'm not like, oh my God, this author's awful. But it's one of those things where it's like, why? Why did they write this? Like, what was the point in writing this? And I do know they talk about race too. I've gotten to a couple parts of that, but I don't know how much more it's talked about. So all in all, I'm DNFing. I am so sorry if you wanted to see me at the end of this book. And I was tearing up at some of this book. But I texted Jess and I said, low-key, this character, Jude, who's a disabled character, he's contemplated suicide and had an attempted suicide, accidental or not. It's low-key, like, triggering. And so she was like, I think you should stop reading that. I was like, yeah, maybe you're right. I just don't know if this book is personally for me. But I really wonder, it makes me question a lot of things, like, did she have sensitivity readers? Like, I know other genres besides romance, which I primarily read romance. I do know, like, there's a lot of sensitivity readers and stuff like that, and I can't imagine a character like this being in a romance book that doesn't get a happily ever after. I would be honestly pissed if that wasn't a trigger warning for me. But I do know that other genres don't necessarily put trigger warnings. There's no trigger warnings in this book at all. And I understand, like, friendship is the big part of this book, right? Like, friendship is a huge part of it. And don't get me wrong, I do feel like a burden. And I have great friends that, even though I still feel like that, they have never made me feel that way. It's just an internal thing that I have. And so I'm like, I don't particularly want to read that. So I hope my thoughts all make sense, and I had to sit on them because I was going to record this last night when I decided to DNF, and I was like, I'm a little too heated, and I don't want to say something that's going to come across as, like, mean or upset. But it's one of those things, it's like, there's just too many people in life that live with a chronic illness and or disability that deals with the same things that Jude is dealing with, and just knowing at the end of the book there is no light at the end of the tunnel for him. It's realistic, but for me, it's a little too close to home. You know what I mean? Like, it leans, for my life, leans more nonfiction than fiction, if you know what I mean. So that's why I'm DNFing it. I hope that makes sense. I also don't understand why someone would write just this book to be traumatic, just to be traumatic, you know what I mean? Like, why? Why? If you watched my vlog for if he had been with me, I feel like it's a similar, like, why write a quote-unquote romance for that book for one of the characters to die in that book? So, yeah. Unfortunately, I have to DNF this book just because it's not good. It's just not the book for me. And I was debating on rating it 1 star, so I was actually really mad that I read this book and I started reading it and knowing that there's a disabled character, not knowing if she had sensitivity readers or if this is someone's lived experience, hers or someone she knows. Like, there's all of these things, right? It makes me mad that this was written and it depicted in a way, but also I can't be mad because it's such a realistic thing for a lot of people who are disabled that I'm like, I can't be mad because it is like a realistic thing for people, but at the same time, as a disabled person, I don't want to read that. But is it my fault for picking up this book? 1, not knowing, which is on me, but 2, like, this book is not someone for me. But also I see so many people crying and I'm like, okay, well, this is such a realistic thing for a lot of disabled people and people are crying about it. So it's like they're crying about not my life, but like other people who are disabled. I don't know. It's all in my head. It's like all up, jumbled up in my head. I hope that makes sense. But unfortunately, this is a no-go for me. So I really wanted to finish this vlog. Like, I was debating on, like, I'm vlogging, I wanted to do it. And Jess was like, just sit down and talk about your feelings. And my husband was like, fuck that book, don't read it. You have other things you want to read, right? So, like, the writing is good. I mean, I like the writing style. It's written kind of like it's kind of like a biography where, like, the person's telling the story of their life, and it's interesting. So that part's not, like, weird to me at all, but it's more like the content, so sorry. Still hope you enjoyed this vlog, though. If you've made it this far and you want to leave me an emoji, leave me a sunshine emoji. I don't know why, because it's spring. Leave me a sunshine emoji in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for more content from me. As always, I hope you're living a novel life, and I will see you in my next one. Bye, guys.